Welcome to another EMA Consultancy podcast. I'm pleased to be joined today by EMA Director Ian Robertson. Today we're going to pick up on a subject we discussed last year, the impacts of the pandemic on the workplace and what the future looks like. Hello, Ian.
Hello, Stuart.
Right, let's kick off the first question, Ian. Last year, you carried out your survey, which showed a major shift to the hybrid workplace as a result of the pandemic. At the time, you explained how organisations were having to rethink their workplaces and how staff work, as well as the impact of the pandemic on pay and reward. The model was very much a work in progress. Ian, are we any nearer having a clear picture of what the workplace for the next decade will look like?
I think we are, Stuart. There is no doubt that agile working is here to stay. Many companies have embraced this model, have made changes to office layouts. In many cases, I'm aware of where the offices have actually been closed to facilitate hybrid working. However, there are some early signs that in some cases staff performance has started to drop, which may be of concern. But again, there's also examples where staff are working extremely hard, working longer hours and delivering more productivity than they did previously. So that's probably compensating some of the issues that we are seeing develop. We've also seen a couple of other changes to the labour market. One being that people are willing to change jobs and travel longer distances to get to a new job or a new place of work, simply because hybrid working gives them the opportunity to do 2-3 days at home and the other 2 days in the office. So that's the compensation or trade-off for them. The second thing that we are seeing is in regard to the skills and competencies managers need to be able to manage their staff. Gone are the days when they're sat in an office and they can see them every day doing the job. They have to think about how they will work with their staff and be able to manage and trust their staff to deliver. So that we are seeing changes there as well.
Okay, Ian, so we thought the hybrid workplace was going to be a permanent fixture, and now that certainly seems to be the case. I suspect organisations have learnt a lot since we last spoke and are still having to learn. In your experience, what have been the biggest changes?
I think the key things I've seen is how do staff and managers engage with each other, and how do staff retain their motivation, but also the skills and competencies to do the job. So I think probably the key question is how do managers build relationships with their staff to ensure that they can deliver the services that need to be done. There's a couple of other things I think the key issues that are developing. One is around gender pay. To some extent, over the last 10, 15 years, the difference between women and men's pay, the gap has started to reduce. But there are some indications, and it may be of concern, that more men may go back into the office. That might allow them to build the relationships with the key decision makers and give them the promotion opportunities that women didn't or might not see. So that may be of concern, and it might widen the pay gap rather than reduce the pay gap. But these are early days. The other thing that we are seeing is salary levels changing simply because staff are willing to travel to new places of work. So gone are the days when they looked around their geographical area, which may be 10, 15 miles. They're now looking at 40, 50 miles to travel to work. And some of the best examples we've seen are around the London area, where people who are working outside London are willing to travel to work in London simply because they're only working 2-3 days a week in the office, the other 2-3 days at home. So they're reducing their time on travel, but also reducing the cost to travel to work. So we are seeing some differences in there. Consequences are, particularly staff and companies, are in a position whereby staff are finding their salary levels simply increasing simply because companies are offering them more money to retain their services.
Some really interesting points in there and a few controversial points, really, certainly around the gender pay gap. I think that's probably one to keep an eye on for future podcasts and just really, as you say, early days, but let's see how that plays out. So innovation has been shaping the workplace, but I suspect it's not all been plain sailing, clearly what a few points you just raised there, Ian. So let's just focus on the blended agile working aspect. What 3 things should organisations be considering if they want to make this a success in the long run?
The top one from my point of view is to make sure staff have got the facilities to be able to work from home. And that's not just their desk and a chair, but we need to think about what kind of work location they are in. So they've got suitable facilities which allow them to work from home. For example, have they got their own office there? And we are aware that some companies have given grants to individuals to allow them to build extensions or to put a cabin in their garden. So that's one thing. The second thing is to allow the staff flexibility and trust to get on with and do the job. We are aware that in certain situations, managers just don't trust the staff. But it also works the other way. Staff don't trust managers, and they're keen to retain things such as flexi time to make sure that their hours are logged and they can prove they've done the work they do. And the third thing is to make sure managers have the skills to be able to manage staff working in remote locations. And that's looking and ensuring they've got the competencies to do the job to do that.
Again, some interesting points. It sounds like we've got offices all over the country, many offices all at a very local level now. So when we spoke before this podcast, you mentioned a flexi benefits pot. I think it'd just be interesting to pick up on that and just explain what that actually is.
The flex benefits pot is a fairly new benefit, particularly for the housing sector. The private sector's had it for some time. Flex pots are where people are given a sum of money, and it can be £500, £1,000, or possibly even more. And that allows them to choose a particular benefit from a choice of 5 or 10 benefits the company puts together. These can be, for example, to buy life insurance, travel insurance, but it also could be to buy additional leave, or it possibly could be to buy additional pension payments. So there are different ways that companies look at this, and it really depends on what kind of company it is and what kind of benefits they want to introduce, and really what staff want as well. But it gives the opportunity for people to choose and select benefits which suit their lifestyle.
Thanks for that explanation, Ian. And just finally, you've almost touched on this, work-life balance, getting the hours right when working from home, it's important, but it's also dependent on a high level of trust that employees are actually doing what they should be doing when they say they're doing it. How do we get the balance right?
The key is to make sure that the managers and staff work closely together, and they can only work closely together by regular one-to-one meetings or regular team meetings. I don't think it's good enough for managers to engage with staff once a month. It has to be at least once a week. And by building those relationships and keeping in touch with each other, they can be sure that when individuals say they're doing something, they are doing it. But at the same time, it also gives the opportunity for staff to feedback to managers as to what they're doing, where they've got any particular problems, any issues, and they can be tackled immediately.
So clearly, keeping those channels of communication open on a very regular basis is one of the key aspects of making the model work.
Yeah, very important to make sure that happens.
Oh, well, thanks very much, Ian. No doubt we'll be sat around this table again discussing how the workplace has changed. For our listeners, if you want to get in touch with Ian, do so via the EMA website or through our social media channels. Thanks for listening and look out for the next podcast.